Hey guys, what is going on? Good to see you. It's been a while. I have my buddy Andrew Moreno on today. If you don't know who he is, he's a degenerate gambler for a living. Um, don't ever suggest anybody follow in his footsteps unless you want to experience wild success after a long, long journey. So, how'd you do it? How are you an overnight success? And what's the key to winning seven figures and changing your life? What's going on with that?
There's a pill. There's actually a pill that just came out. Have you ever seen the movie Limitless?
Mm-hmm.
So that just came out. I got the test trial of it, and that's it. You just take this pill, and then it happens. It kind of takes a. You don't want to do it on an empty stomach. It's pretty strong. So
Yeah. Your
yeah,
eyes look like they've chilled out, so you're probably not on the stuff right now.
yeah. No, it's still in my system.
All right. Well, if you guys have been living under a rock in the poker world, Andrew won a big tournament recently, two tournaments actually. I also have won a Venetian deep stack. I broke my trophy. It was kind of a sad day because I don't play tournaments, so having like a Venetian $300 trophy or whatever was cool to have in the house, and I fucking broke it. So that was kind of sad. But anyways, you kind of had this amazing run, and we'll get into that a little bit. But like, I kind of wanted to use this time to, because there's been plenty of interviews you've done now that talk about, big hands that you've played, the journey throughout that tournament, baby coming out, like the whole story. It's a pretty epic story. It kind of could be like a small book written about it, but I kind of wanted to talk more about some psychological things, getting a little bit deeper into your mind because I know you specifically kind of like talking about that stuff, and maybe your whole crew in general. So the first thing I kind of wanted to touch on was like, you had this kind of thing a while ago, only a few months ago, where you were like, okay, I'm gonna focus on this tournament thing for a while. I'm gonna really commit myself to it. Why? Right? Why now? I mean, you've been playing God knows how long. Why? What was like the deep thing for that? Because I know you as a cash game player historically. I know you've done well in some tournaments and stuff, but yeah, what was your reasoning?
Yeah, I mean, two main reasons, honestly. So the first reason I think, which is probably, I don't know, I'm not going to categorize most important. Um, but the first reason that I'll talk about is that as a someone that just is into being not just a gambler, but like I'm an investor and I'm an entrepreneur, you really want to look at where the EV is at. You want to like if you're in an investment, for example, and or maybe you bought a stock and you're into this thing, you think it's great and it makes you tons of money, but if after a couple of years you see the money is like slowly starting to cycle down and you just stay into that stock and then maybe all of a sudden it's breaking even or potentially losing, you're just making a big mistake. And poker is a lot the same. Like the cash game scene has largely been on a downward trend, at least the public games, because a lot of the best games have gone private. So I think a lot of people are making a mistake and that they just like I play just play cash games and like I see all these guys that like the Commerce or wherever in Los Angeles or even in Vegas, and they're just grinding low stakes. And right now, there's just been a huge resurgence to live poker tournaments, and I believe that the EV, the ROI is just much higher right now than it's ever been because people have been kind of cooped up from COVID and quarantine, and there's been this really big resurgence. All of the first thing that caught my attention was just the guarantees. They guarantee these prize pools, and they were getting like 2x, 3x, 4x, 5x the prize pool all over the place. So then I just was like, okay, maybe I should take a look at this. I went and played one, and it was very, very good soft field. So kind of confirmed my suspicions. And then the second reason is that I've always thought of myself as more of a traditional tournament player. And, one thing that I think is like a really valuable lesson for me, I wish I would have learned it a long time ago, is that, and this is the cliche thing that you always hear, but it's like everybody told me that I should focus on cash games and I shouldn't focus on tournaments. So that's what I did. I had a couple of friends that were tournament players and they were miserable and they're like, don't do it. You get stuck deep in makeup. It's expensive. Like you can go on big downswings. And I just was always in my ear about like how hard they are and how much variance there is. And like at my heart of hearts, I knew that I was like more of that type of player. And I thought that I had a really good sense for them. And yeah, so then I've always kind of turned that part of what I think I should do. And so if I could go back, when I look back and watch some of these poker tournaments from the last 5 or 10 years, I would have done really well over that time in tournaments. So yeah, valuable lesson for me for sure.
Yeah, because just like there's this battle of identity in poker, right? Like you're either part of this crew or part of that crew. And you start thinking like, I deep down I kind of want to be a tournament player or at least play more tournaments, but like, that doesn't like look good on my cash game status or whatever. And I think everybody deals with that because then you feel like kind of tribal, right? You're part of this cash game thing, and if you go start playing like a series of tournaments and you like bust out, you're like going against the kind of code of the elite cash game player or whatever, right? That's not allowed.
And also, there's this thing in cash game poker that like they believe that they're superior, in their skill level and their hourly rate. And so like you're kind of like turning your back on that and saying like, hey, I know all of you guys are really the best players in the world, or like all these like high end top tier players. You're like, but I'm gonna go against that and say that I think, I know better. And that's like, you kind of do feel like you could get shunned. I don't know. I don't think it's quite so severe, but yeah, on the inside, there's some of that happening.
Yeah, and it's funny because like before we were getting online, we were talking about like in the end, nobody gives a shit, you know? Like if you were to go play an entire year of tournaments and then come back to cash games, even if maybe I was playing in cash games with you or something, I'd look back and be like, oh yeah, there's Andrew. And then I'd go back to like my cards,
Yeah,
right?
that would be the extent of it.
Yeah. But it was supposed to work out the way it was supposed to work out because those that 10 years or whatever it was of grinding cash games, playing against really good players set you up for being able to perform at these levels. And yeah, maybe you would have destroyed tournaments too, but maybe you would never have reached the level you're at now had you taken that route. I don't know. Maybe you would be playing in every high roller or something and be like the Ali is Ramovich guy or whatever, and that would be your thing. But that wasn't your path, right?
Yeah, no, I mean it's definitely been. I definitely owe a lot to cash game poker. I mean it's especially over quarantine, like allowing me to be a lot more technical and learn a lot more of the fundamentals, game theory optimal type of play. Really, I think complements my tournament game really well. And yeah, it was just crazy. It is just like I think it was in like April. We're still in July, right? Just the tail end of July, and just to like say, hey, yeah, I want to start playing tournaments, and then just like I cashed in the first 8 tournaments I played, made 3 final tables and won 2 of them. And obviously, like, I'm no fool. Like, there's a variance in there. I'm sure I ran well over that sample. Um, but yeah, definitely feels good too.
Yeah, I could imagine. Feels pretty solid. A new change too. Now, like it's nice shaking up the bottle, see what happens. So yeah, you transferred to this mindset, and like, what do you feel like in order to now go down this road, you had to change about yourself as a poker player, as a learner, as a grinder? Like your schedule is going to be changing. Like your confidence has to be tested constantly. I mean, to be honest, it really hasn't lately because you've had this streak of cashes or whatever, right? But normally tournament players patience probably run thinner than a lot of people because there's so many times where you walk out putting in so much work and getting nothing back. So like, what has been your approach in shifting to this new world, if you will? And does it feel more comfortable? Does it feel weird?
Yeah, so I think one thing that comes up for me is that I feel like when you start and you really play a lot of tournament poker, you do understand that a large percentage of the time you're going to show up, you're going to play, and you're not going to make any tangible dollars. Um, but I feel like the thing that really gives me comfort is a knowing that I've like done the preparation on the front end to know that I'm playing well, and then B, that when I do play and I execute my strategy, that I can just like take comfort in knowing that I am playing a good strategy, and that I guess C would be, that the value is there. So like I show up and I like get all in a lot of situations where like typically in cash games, it's pretty rare to be pushing like pretty big edges, like to get all in. And let's say you get somebody drawn into like 20% or 30% or 10% or dead with one or two cards to go is very, very rare these days. Most of the times you get all in, it's like coin flip situations or somebody is pushing like a 10% edge. But then when you play tournaments and even when it doesn't work out for you, because the fields are so great and because I feel good about the preparation that I've done and the strategy that I'm using, and you see these situations where you get into situations where you're pushing 20, 30, 40%. And when it doesn't work out, that still is so much comfort because you're just like, I feel like I'm in just like it's like a way more relaxing environment. When you're pushing like those small edges all the time, it's just like a lot more stress. The swings are bigger. Um, and especially when you play fairly big, which is I've been playing pretty big online and live for the last few years. When you're pushing a lot of those smaller edges for coin flips or like 5 or 10%, I think you ask a lot of people like, would you take, if I give you 5%, would you flip a coin for $20,000? A lot of people are like, they probably say no, so you have to find that number that's good for you, that you're comfortable with. And with tournaments, it's a set price. You buy in, and obviously the stakes kind of increase as you move through the tournament. But pushing those edges for that fixed amount of money. Although, yeah, at the end it definitely can be a little bit, taking a coin flip with like three people left, for example. That's kind of a different conversation. But yeah, so I think that's probably the main thing that I like. Yeah, I hope that answers the question, I guess. So.
Yeah, I think so. But I just thought of when you were just saying that tournaments are kind of like a call option, right? It's like a determined amount of risk for like a potentially really large payout, but often you're just going to burn money, on call options that you buy. So that was kind of an interesting. I didn't really ever think of it like that, but yeah. So it sounds like your mindset is pretty great, and I think there's probably a little bit of an ease being at a table with like less, especially like the environment's more stressful. People pushing small edges, and then there's a lot of like seats filled up with great players, and then you have this new environment where like often it's probably going to be three to four players that are going to show up to really um, play, and then maybe three or four players that are going to be kind of softer seats. And there's like a nice feeling to that too, right? Like it's a little bit less of just a cage match every single session.
Yeah, and something else that came up for me when you're saying that is that like the way I've totally changed my approach because I was in a pretty big downswing about it's been about 2 years now. But yeah, I basically feel like I didn't win for like a year playing cash games. And that'll do a lot to your psyche. And I did a lot of like internal work, therapy, talking with friends and family. And some things were more valuable than others. But I think, yeah, part of that for me was like kind of restructuring how I view poker and like how I'm going to Yeah, I kind of got lost for a second. Sometimes I talk in such a big circle that I get so far
Oh,
out and I got to come back.
that's fine.
Um, yeah, no, I think it's gone now. So maybe I should bring it back. Hold on
That's
a
all right.
second.
You were just saying how you had such a struggle for a long time and you kind of reshifted how you thought about poker as a whole, talking to friends, talking to family, and that you've kind of come out the other side of that. And so you're looking at poker in a completely different fashion now.
Yeah, yeah, I don't know. I think it's the camera got me on that one.
That's
I
fine.
like, yeah,
One thing, so when you talk about something like that, like do you think that also aids in the ability to be a tournament player when you have good friends, good family, people to talk to? Because I think about those tournament players sometimes, and yeah, they're like these, you know, 30-year-old kids. A lot of them, to be honest, could be single gamer type introverts that are very good at what they do, but maybe don't have that like outlet, that kind of balance, that like, look at the light shining through your windows right now. You get to come home to that every day, get the fresh San Diego air, take some time off, like get ready for the next set of events. Like I feel like that aura or whatever you want to call it is like a good way to refresh yourself each time too. But if you don't have that, I feel like that could be this downward internal spiral that where some of these guys that get, especially when the makeup starts adding up, like how do you ever even get out of that? You know?
yeah. I think one of the things that I've worked really hard on is just like being strong mentally, and I see it all the time. I mean, it's just incredible, like how many people, great players even, um, just kind of give up mentally. I like one of the best qualities any tournament player can have is the ability to get kicked around and like let your ego get stepped on and just let that happen like all day long, and then just like make it through to the next day, and then just like let it happen all day long again, and then just like get through the next day, and then like hoping and like waiting for your moment to where you can like express yourself for who you believe you are as a poker player, push your edges, and catch a little bit of luck. And yeah, I see it all the time where like somebody just like will basically, like what we say is like make a punt, where they just like make like this really desperate crazy move for no reason because their ego is getting pushed or they're tired of getting kind of like pushed around. And that's probably one of the biggest things that I've matured in my poker career, because I was like the guy that I would play well and like I could build stacks, and then like inevitably in a tournament I would like make some really crazy moves because people would play aggressively into me. And now I just don't do that. Like I mean, I definitely do make some crazier moves, but like they're very very infrequent and they're way more calculated than they used to be.
Yeah, and when you do it, it's like you're dictating the spot, right? It's a thought out attack rather than a reaction to being put into a corner by somebody else, right? And that corner often is, and I dealt with that too, is like you made up that corner. That corner never existed until you found yourself in that spot. And I think that spot eats away at your hourly, like, I mean, maybe the most. Like, you could be treading along in a session that's going fine and you're playing quote unquote well, and like one of those moments like can define like the next month of your like live play if you allow that, like, um if you don't allow your ego to be stepped on once in a while, right? And you
Yeah,
find yourself in that one hand where somehow in the hand you're just like, it's not even you playing anymore, it's just your little like devil guy on your shoulder playing the hand, right?
yeah. There's one thing that comes up that I think is really fascinating that I just feel like this is a thing that isn't really talked about, but a lot of people probably experience, and that's and I'll give you an example in poker and one in real life. But there's like I'll give you a quick technical example where like if you have 30 big blinds in a poker tournament and you get dealt ace king and you get all in, like it's fine. Like you're making it's probably a good play. Like you don't need to worry about it. You got all in. And like everybody would say like you didn't screw the hand up. And like once you really are studied and you play a lot of hours, like there will be situations that come up where getting an ace king is like probably not a good idea and very likely a bad play. But you kind of have this idea in your head. You're like, well, like I know I could just like call here and then check fold the flop when I miss. But like I know I could just get it in and it's always gonna be fine. Like no one would ever like bat an eye at this. And then you go all in and then whatever you end up losing the hand bust in the tournament. And I feel like there's this shift that's made, at least for me, like when I feel like I really turned a corner in my career where I started to really stop letting myself off the hook in these like really close, tough situations. And I noticed it too. The first place it came from was when I used to run. I was like a pretty competitive runner in high school. I don't know, I was pretty good. I wasn't fantastic or anything. But I remember I would be in races and there's this point I ran like the half mile and the quarter mile. And there was always a point at which I could, maybe I was running a great race, maybe it was even a personal best or close to it. And there was always a point at which I was like, oh, you've done like so well. Like if you just like finish the race now, like at like because there's all this pain and all these things that are happening in the race, and you just like coach yourself to like just finish the race. And there's this like 5 or 10% more that I could have given, but I just like allowed myself to like, oh, that was really good. I did great already. Let me just make sure. Let me lock this up and like make sure I don't gas out or burn out. And I feel like the same thing happens in poker where I used to get into these spots where like, you know, especially in big tournaments where like everybody's going broke here. Maybe it's on the river where like I have a really strong hand that I should never fold. Um, and then I just like, I know that if I call here and lose, like it's standard, as they say. Nobody cares. Everybody's like, you did right. If I fold and I'm wrong, I'm the worst player in the world, an idiot. I'll feel really bad. But then when you get like your 10,000 hours, like I feel like I have, you got to rely on those and like you got to make those exploits and like um, basically stop letting yourself off the hook. And like once I started doing that, I feel like, and it's not like you don't get any confirmation, but like you fold a hand that like nobody would have folded, and then like go on and like you don't get to see the cards, so you know it can eat at you if you're not entirely sure. And that's like one of the reasons why it's so hard to do it. But yeah, I think it's really important for people because I know it's in like all areas of life that we kind of like let ourselves off the hook. You're like, oh man, like I worked out like 5 days this week, and or I've like, you know, been really good with my diet. But like maybe you had some plan to just be like, well, I'm gonna work out these days. I'm gonna like take these days for like eating healthy and my cheat days or whatever. And then you just kind of like, you know, erode that by saying like, oh well, then I did 4 days. Like I'm just a little tired of than I thought I'd be, so I'll just don't do today. And 4 days is great. I'm super happy, and I'm sure that is good or whatever, you know, and especially as you progress. But when you're competing at like a championship level for poker, especially, like you have to like be incredibly strong in that way.
Yeah, like you can just create any of those outs for you in like any area of your life, right? It's like one of the reasons I think athletes that are at the top level are so impressive, like especially these ones that, you know, have really stood at the top for a long time is that they do all this like they have this commitment that is just all encompassing. No, they don't ever let themselves off the hook and like they get trolled for it, right? Like Kobe is probably a good example, right? Like you hear all the stories about how he's just always practicing, always thinking about it. He's like got this plan and he doesn't ever give himself an out. And people are like would probably make fun of him for that, but deep down they know that's what it takes, and they know that's why they're not Kobe. You know what I mean? Um, and yeah, but poker gives you all of that bailout. I had that, like I remember that bailout of like telling a hand history just for the comfort of somebody being like, no man, you played it fine, right? Or like getting this little pat on the back, like you're gonna be okay. Um, and I really don't want to compare you to this guy, but when I heard you say that, I immediately thought of Phil Hellmuth, right? Because I was like, this guy just listens to Phil Hellmuth, right? He rides by the beat of his own. Like, if he wants to fold aces pre-flop for whatever reason, he'll just do it, right? Like and I think that serves him well in other spots that clearly do well for him in like tournament player or cash game player or whatever it is in his life that he does. But he is just so like aligned with like instinctual, like, I'm just gonna do this. I don't care that I'm on TV or whatever. And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe this is a bad read on Phil, but does that make sense to you at all?
Yeah, I think like a lot of really elite players, like you have to have this courage to like look stupid or be wrong. I mean, even in the tournament, the Wynn Millions, the 10K, like I made some all-in bluffs that were like, I mean, at least one of them especially, like I knew that it was like if I get called here and they like and people see that I'm bluffing, I'm people are gonna be like, this guy, what the hell is he doing? You know, and it was like you have to be willing to like put yourself out there, test your theories, and it sounds like so obvious, but it's so scary. Like I like when you play a lot of poker, fear just runs everyone. Fear of like getting stacked, fear of making a mistake, fear of what other people are gonna think, fear of having a losing session. You know, it's just like fear of losing a little bit money back when you're winning. Like everyone is just always afraid. And that was one of the things that I feel like I always struggled with when I would play against other players that like seemed to lack fear, you know, in like a lot of ways, like a lot of the best players. So like kind of a copycat, like I was like, okay, well then I'll just like play in a manner that is like, you know, emulates that until I really started to fear a lot less. And I can tell you, man, like I look like when people tell me they played with me, I'm like, well, you might think I'm really terrible or really good because I made so many ridiculous got called and like I know a lot of people think I'm really bad at poker because over the years I've done a lot of really crazy things. But I really feel like that's kind of how you figure out who you are and like how, you know, like the only way you can figure out that something's like really a mistake is you're like, oh, I picked up on this thing, like maybe this is a thing, and then you try it all these different ways and you're like, oh, but finally you realize something subtly was off, and then now it starts working. And I just think people are living in too much of a box. Like people are just they stick to the right play, and that's the thing. If you just play really tight, really solid, you make these sound decisions over and over again. Like you'll probably eke out profit and you'll beat a lot of the bad players. But you know, if you want to elevate yourself or if you want to look, you know, what's beyond that, you're really going to have to start to have some creativity, and you're going to have to really start to step out on the ledge a little bit.
Yeah, and it goes to say like having some sort of like original thoughts too, right? Like um this makes me think of like where I have hit a wall in trading, right? Like I would say I'm a good tag trader, right? Like I make fairly standard plays with limited risk or whatever. But I think I have this next level to kind of unlock in my career, and it goes exactly with what you just said. And I feel like it's a combination of taking that like really grind heavy solid game that I've taken, but then like expanding it to a bit of a awkward thought, like uh contrarian, weird things that just wouldn't normally fit in a box. And I necessarily sometimes you just feel yourself in a spot where you're like, like I could probably do this, but I'm not going to because, you know, that's not how James trades or whatever, right? Like for me, I constantly am thinking about like how can I, you know, push that next box. And it's a long process. And it seems like, you know, obviously it's taken you a long time to get to that level too, but it's like encompassing all the shit we've already talked about, like having to let the ego go, not, you know, me having to explain to my risk desk or whatever if I lose a bunch of money on an idea of like what the fuck I was thinking or whatever. But they're out there, and I think that's how you have that big, you know, 8-figure trade or whatever it is, you know. So that's how some of these hedge fund dudes that people know in the space like make their careers, is they kind of build this story in their head, and a lot of it is based on a lot of truth or whatever, but then they're the ones that take that big shot in certain places that nobody else will do it because that's not the standard thing, and they had these asymmetric payouts. Or sometimes it, you know, like you said, if you got called in certain spots, you know, people would be like, what the fuck, right? But also it can turn you into like a hero, and that's, you know, it's cool.
Well, there's
And
one thing.
what
Oh, go ahead. Yeah, sorry.
I was just gonna finish when you said, like, you know, there's a lot of people out there that probably think I suck at poker or think I'm good at poker. I'm thinking like, who? Like 8 people that you played with once probably think you suck at poker because you like played a hand in 5-10 where you like called a river bet, and you know, like who cares?
Yeah. Yeah, no, there's so something that you were saying that I feel like you and I like I see the parallel from like where you are and like where I am and like, you know, I've been in poker for almost 20 years and like I don't think there's anything wrong with making like the standard good play. Like I've made my career on that. Like I just like learned how to make solid plus EV decisions. And like that's the fundamental, like the foundation of any good poker player. And then like once you are in poker for a long time, you know, it becomes really mechanical. Like if you just show up and you're always like, yeah, when someone does A, I do B, when they do C, I do D, or whatever. And you know, that's your strategy. You play it all the time. You show up and you're just kind of clicking the combination that you always click. And then after, you know, 5 years, 10 years, 15, now for me, 20 years, like I'm looking for something else now. Like I'm trying to elevate my game and I'm looking past, you know, kind of like that point. And I don't think, again, I just wanted to reiterate that I don't think there's anything wrong with, you know, just making that play. And I think once you're in an industry for a long time and you're just always doing the safe, reliable thing, and you become really comfortable and confident with how to execute that strategy, then you can like start to venture out and make some of those riskier trades, you know, crash and burn, you know, crash and burning on like a riskier trade now is going to be exponentially different for you than if you would have done it in your first 6 months or your first 2 years. So I feel like maybe with you, you know, being, how long have you been in your industry now? It's been quite a while, right?
8 years, yeah.
Yeah, so 8 years in, like I'm sure like, you know, you're probably already experiencing to some degree like that monotony of executing your strategy. Or I would imagine, I don't know actually how it is.
You're absolutely right. You're looking for like a little more zest, a little more like depth, or like you're reaching a point where you're kind of like, what's next for me? Is it elevating to a different level, or is it just kind of a slow end, if you will? And yeah, I think it did require many years, like you know. That this actually kind of rolls right into something else I wanted to talk about, is like it did what happened for you here kind of solidify where you're looking forward and what you want to do and what you've been thinking, or have you been like looking to exit poker? Like, is this a rejuvenation? Like, what is this for you?
Yeah, so you know, like my main focus right now is really like my family and like I'm gonna be a dad here in a couple I think. So we'll see. Those things can change, you know, as far as like when the baby decides to come. But realistically, like my goal is to explore poker and like really test myself and push myself as far as I possibly can. And when and if the opportunity arises to segue my life more stable, then I'm going to jump at that chance. And I think with some of the money that I've been able to save and win at poker, the idea is to eventually move into a more stable career because you know it's different when you're in your early 20s or even early 30s or where I'm at now, my late 30s, when you know it's just myself.
Old man.
I know, yeah, 38, man. There's some grays in here. But yeah, so now that there's a kid on the way, like maybe potentially more kids down the road, it's stability is a thing that is not doesn't really go. It's not synonymous in poker. So yeah, so now I'm definitely looking to have some things that are more stable. Yeah.
Do you think like the cash game life or the tournament life provides a little bit more stability? In your eyes, I bet most people would say cash games, but I'm wondering if that would be different for you.
Yeah, but the thing is, like, man, just playing cash games now is like, it's so tough. Like, if you want to play bigger, like, if you want to play like not small stakes or mid stakes, the game is going to be really tough and there's going to be a lot of variance and there's a lot of stress involved. So, yeah, it can be more consistent. And there definitely is something to be said about the player pool that you play in because that's everything. Like, I know guys that play up in Northern California that like think they're the best poker player in the world because they win every week. But the games are just incredible there, and that's totally different than playing in Vegas, which is totally different than playing in LA, which is different than playing in Florida. And so like, some people have great access to games like in a public forum or in a private forum. And, that's great for them. And I just don't really have that. So um like I would be forced to play like fairly like mid stakes, uh, and like because I don't want to bang against like Garrett and Andy and all these guys that like live at the bike, because like they're just better than I am and they have more money and more experience and it'll be stressful and like I'm sure I could be consistently a winner in those games, um, but I I just feel like for my quality of life, I mean the kind of stress that comes with those swings, those guys are different, like I don't know. I mean, I hesitate to say that because all the same in a lot of ways, and I'm sure they really struggle with a lot of the swings. But they're definitely used to those six-figure ups and downs like a lot more than I am. So, but yeah, I would say like I'm just more looking to have something a little less stressful as well.
Yeah, it's tough question in this world that we've kind of found ourselves in these past couple decades. So on that note, with poker, like what do you still love that poker gives you? Like when everybody talks about poker, the first thing professionals say is like, the freedom of it. I love my schedule is dictated by me or whatever. Oddly enough, I found that to be kind of opposite of what I thought. I ended up thinking I had a terrible schedule and I felt chained to it for a lot of times. But so what does poker give you? And then like, what is it not giving you that you wish you could maybe have more of?
Yeah, poker is like, man, the thing I just still absolutely love about poker is that like you can show up every day and you can like take this puzzle and dump it out on the table and every day it's something interesting and different and dynamic. It's always changing. When you think you know something about it, like it surprises you. And like that in the case for the last 20 years. It's continually evolving. I'm evolving within this thing. And yeah, it's been to me that's incredible. Like being able to continually learn is huge because I feel like once I started to study again, really like spend some time studying poker, um, that really kind of rejuvenated a lot of the juices for me. So that as well. I think as far as poker, not what it doesn't give me, I think is probably the same thing that everyone says, which is like you're a taker when you're a poker player. Like you don't give anything to society. You don't like there always is for me like a bad feeling involved with like it's hard to just feel good when you win at poker because it's a zero sum game and somebody is losing that money. And especially in tournaments when you see somebody get devastated, like guys, pros that like Rex, recreational players, family men, like your grandma, like all these people at the table, and you can see like these really high pressure situations where people crumble or get crushed for like large sums of money, like that feels like there's always this like emotion. It's like emotional warfare. It's like an emotional like chaos that's always happening around you, where like everyone's perishing and like there's all these crazy emotions around you. And yeah, like to me, like that's a big part of like when I leave a tournament, I feel like I go home. It's just like so many things to just like process, like feelings, or like your emotions are really, really fully in effect when you're playing tournament poker or poker in general. So the main thing, just to be more precise, that I think um, that is unfortunate with poker is that you don't really get anything. You don't give anything to society. You're not really contributing anything to the world. But there are ways to do that outside of poker. But yeah, that's a tough one.
Yeah. That totally makes sense. And one thing that I think of with trading is like I feel that trading has given me one step away from that, right? Like there's this mishmash of information happening, but you're like removed from it, right? You're just some guy behind a screen in a big world of buyers and sellers, and you never experience that emotional chaos really. Yeah, you might see volatility in the markets, but you don't know who's winning, who's losing. Is it an asshole um, wealth management fund guy? And a lot of people would say like it's good that he's losing and giving back to the retail traders, right? Or is it retail traders losing who are, you can trade as young as like the 13 now, I think, on TD Ameritrade and stuff. They're starting to let like very young kids do it if they're approved by their parents. So like you don't know if that's who's losing, right? So it's this one step of removal. And I remember that in poker too. Like sometimes it's hard to just feel great about everything, even during like your best playing winning session. There's always something, it could be an interaction you had at the table, something you saw in the card room. There's always something. It's really weird.
Yeah. I mean the tournament that so like when I won the whatever the Win Millions, I I mean it just sucks because like like you always think like you should feel a certain way, like I should be happy, I should celebrate. But legitimately, I just felt bad for the other guy. I couldn't shake it off because like I made a mistake again, and I feel like I should have lost because I made a mistake. It was like the one big mistake that I made, and I just couldn't like even when I shook his hand, I was like, oh, like I fucked up, like and I couldn't shake it for the whole night. I just like I had a hard time relaxing because like like these are like costly mistakes, six figure like this would have been like roughly a $200,000 mistake, $220,000 mistake that I made. Should have got second place from it. And like that's a lot of money. And it's not just the money, but like, he was a good professional and I wanted to like battle him and like make no mistakes and like this was a part of my like my plan for everything and just it tarnished it to a certain extent. And it's like, man, it's just crazy that I like, my family's rushing in and grabbing me and picking me up, and I'm just thinking about the other guy, and I'm thinking about how I fucked up, and like I can't even just like, it took me like weeks to let it go. It's crazy. Like I don't know. It's like sounds crazy to say, I think, but
Well,
how
it's
it is.
kind of interesting too, because that guy probably also in the previous 4 or 5 days found himself in a situation where he fucked up, right? And he shouldn't have been where he was, right? It wasn't with you, right? This situation was you with him, right? And it was in a obviously more high stakes situation, but in order for that situation to even happen, like there's no way he played a flawless tournament. Nobody plays a flawless tournament in my eyes, like when it's that long, right? Like there are just fortunate things that had to happen to you when you made mistakes too. And that's probably where tournaments are won. You're playing really well, you're making very few mistakes, but also when you do make mistakes, you kind of find yourself on the fortunate end of them a couple times in a row, right? So like I'm sure when he thinks back on it, yeah, he thinks about that hand too, but like he's probably forgotten about like that day 3 hand where like maybe he was all in with like comparable stacks with ace jack versus ace queen or something, and it just, you flopped the jack and moved on and never thought about it again, you know.
Yeah.
Something happened back there too, where it was just kind of had to go down the way it went down. But
Yeah.
I'm just
I
gonna
guess,
let yourself beat yourself up over that for the next month, you know.
well, the thing that I think is like important for me to realize, and as I say it now, like obviously, like I feel like I played like a pretty on the surface, like I played like incredible, like for all the way through. I'm usually very hard on myself, and I thought I was just in like flow. I crushed. And then at the end, like right before I was like gonna complete this kind of like pristine thing where I didn't make any substantial mistakes, I made this one, and then it like right, it shook me. But now that I like think back on it, it's like fuck perfection anyway, like or what my perception of that is. Like why the like that doesn't like that doesn't do anything for us. Like when we aspire to that, like it only creates pain. But I do also think that that's that's part of being like what I would consider myself to be like an elite performer in poker is that you obsess over the details and like you obsess over the mistakes to the point at which you're learning from them obviously, but you're like using that pain to teach you, you know, on the next tournament. So I kind of see it both ways where I'm like fuck perfection, like I'm like releasing it from that standpoint, but I'm also allowing myself to obsess in the way that I do to try to make the best possible plays and like when I don't like let it hurt. So,
Yeah, I think of golf too. Like, I think of like a high, like an elite golfer on the PGA Tour, like their ability to hit a bad shot, and by the time they get up to their next shot, even if you'll see it with these guys, they're fiery, man. Like they're perfectionists. They hate that they hit it 1 millimeter off on the club face that, you know, that should never have happened, and the ball ended up wherever it did. And then they stand over that next shot and it has like fizzled away into the ether, and they're back to being like they're kind of confident, ridiculously good golfer. So there's that, yeah, there's a balance there somewhere, right, with like this perfectionism but then this ability to like let it go. And it would suck because if you played a perfect tournament in your eyes, like everything else you do from here on out, like you're probably comparing it to that, and no performance is ever going to be as good. Like how can you do better, you know? That would kind of suck.
yeah, I'm also feeling like, you know, because like when I think about like all the elite performers, you know, like we talk about like Michael Jordan or like a lot of these elite golfers or anybody who's dedicated their life to being like a champion at something or like a world class performer. I'm like, well, yeah, I mean, they obsess over every little detail, and that's a part of like them being why they are who they are. And um, like I just think about like the practicality of that and like happiness. Like how many, like if you had to look at all the like Michael Jordan types, all the champions, all the like elite performers, like how happy are they in their personal life? How are their families? How are their interpersonal relationships? And I just know that when I obsess over these things, all of those things suffer. And I would just venture to guess that a lot of those people, probably not all of them, maybe some people have it all figured out, but I'd say a lot of them probably really don't have much in those kind of relationships.
Yeah, you always wonder if they end up kind of regretting certain things or being like, you know, no, I wanted, that's, you know, that was my drive, that was my life. um yeah, like I look back on the Kobe thing again, and I'm like, he finally kind of was past his basketball thing, and he had this family, and he had like little girls playing basketball and stuff. He was finally starting to probably reassess what he has missed, right, and recommit himself now to that side of things, and then he was unable to continue doing that. So the ability to do it simultaneously is like, yeah, it's tough, right? You just kind of assume that if you're going to be somebody or someone like that, you're going to lack a little bit of balance in that way.
It
Maybe you'll
something,
be the first, huh?
yeah, yeah, right. No, yeah, I think something's got to give, you know, when you talk about that kind of performance.
Well, I think we covered a lot here. Um, what's next, man? You got baby coming up in a couple weeks, right? And then that's probably for months. Are you going to do World Series? That's the thing.
Yeah, we rented a house in Vegas. I'm super excited about it because it's just going to be Christy, myself, and my son, and I'll be able to play tournaments during the day, and then at night, I don't have days off, but they're going to be there, and I don't have to feel like I'm missing out with them in California. So that's pretty exciting. But that's I'm not
And the
gonna.
name of your son again was
We
oh
didn't get it
man,
yet. We
just
didn't
really
get it.
holding out on everybody, huh?
We're holding out on ourselves. Like it's been, we were waiting till he's born, so we have a couple final three. So.
I honestly hope it comes down to two and that like a true poker player you guys flip for it. That would
Uh,
be that would be a pretty epic like, story down the road. Who
That
knows?
would be great. We'll have a server like shuffle the names behind her back and just pick one.
Credit card roulette for the day.
She'll pull it out and she's like, "What's this?" I'm like, "Oh, you just named our son that."
Oh, that would be epic. Just to some random person at like a San Diego chain restaurant, you know?
Oh yeah, oh like an Applebee's or something.
Yeah, exactly. Thanks for our $42 bill and naming our child. That'd be pretty great.
Yeah.
All right, man. Well, thanks for taking the time. Just afternoon here, so enjoy the sunset, get some rest, and let us know how the child thing goes.
Yeah, man. Looking forward to it and get some sleep. I know it's about your bedtime, so
Once the sun sets, I'm out. Yeah.
yeah, that's good, man. All right,
All
it's
right. I
nice.
hope everybody got some cool stuff from this. I thought it was a pretty interesting chat.
All right, man. Thank you. I appreciate it. I always enjoy our conversations too.
All right. See you later, Andrew. Tell Christy we all said hi.
All right, take
All
care.
right. Later.